their experiences have made them just incredibly like keen and smart.
Yeah, we would love to share a success story. So I think that there's so many different measures of success. I do want to say that before we even start, because I think most people, number one, I want to even kind of go backwards. We didn't talk about the fact that I think that we have talked around it, but I want to say it explicitly. I think that a lot of us in the States are coached by media to think that human trafficking looks like somebody being kidnapped and thrown in a van and run away to some other locale. And that is, I want to explicitly say that is not what it normally looks like locally. It is not going to look like kidnapping. It is not going to look at like someone pulling up at a van at Wolf Chase. It's probably not even going to look like somebody following you in Target or putting something on your windshield and that's going to dope you up and make it easy for them to kidnap you. And I'm saying all of those because those are very specific kind of tall tales that have gone around social media just even in the last year about what human trafficking might look like in our community.
Right.
And so, but because of that, being successful, so to speak, as you come out of something like what we've described, like intense trauma and intense violence, somebody who their kids might have been taken, they might have been told that they'll never amount to anything. I mean, one of our survivors that we've worked with, like she was recruited or approached, however you want to say it, when she was walking home from school one day, sometime in high school. She can't even remember how old she was. And then when she came out of it, she was in her 30s. And so from just the one pimp, not being bounced around, like not because she got out from one pimp and then got controlled by another, and then there's these random years in between, but she had, I think, 6 children by him, and she was mid 30s, and so she didn't even get to finish high school, much less like go to college, begin kind of that first wave of your first employment history that leads to your next employment history that leads to your next. And so now she's 35 and trying to put her life back together, and she needs to not only get her GED, but also like, how do you convince somebody that I'm employable when there's nothing on the record that says that I'll show up one day or show up 2 days and 3 days in a row? And then there's also like, how do I get my kids back? And how do my kids think of me as a parent when part of the control was he took me around the United States and made me leave my kids in Bartlett, Tennessee, to be controlled by his parents or his mom. And so just all of these like compounding factors of what's success going to look like for her. And I would say just the survivors walking through the door and saying to Julia, like, oh, like I can trust you, and beginning to think like I can trust Julia, or I can trust Cozy, or I can trust Sheila or Samaria or Clarissa, like whoever their case managers are, whoever their residential advocates are, like that they start believing in the good of another person after everything they've experienced. I would already put that in the success category, even if they've only been in the house for 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's really important, like as we talk about success, that we really want to kind of blatantly say to ourselves and to your listeners, like we might want to think that success looks like somebody never going back out to the life, or somebody getting a GED, getting a job, getting an apartment, getting their kids back, and never having any barriers ever again. But I think that that's a lot to put on any one person to change in one year maybe of being in a program, when kind of probably any of us sitting here, at the 3 people at this table, or anyone listening, could probably argue like, it's February what, and have we already kept all of our New Year's resolutions? You know, like change is really hard. Not falling back into prior habits that even if you don't think that they're good for you, they're known, so they're safe in some ways. Like they're just not, they're comfortable. Yeah. Even if they're violent, it's something that I know. And so we actually say as a team, we define success as decreasing vulnerabilities and increasing a sustainable support system. So if somebody comes into our services and in 6 months, quote unquote, all they've done is get a GED. And I'm intentionally putting that in quotes because I think that is really a big deal that should be celebrated.
Yes.
Or even if like one of our youth survivors, if she's been abused since she was young and is always running away from every foster family, but then once she's engaged in services with us, she doesn't run away for 6 weeks, that's a win. Because she's beginning to change, like making small changes in her behavior because she believes that like tomorrow could be different than today.
Yeah.
And so I think success, like we just really intentionally try to think about success of like these tiny small wins that show that their vulnerabilities are decreasing, like meaning kind of like their mental, like their psychological perceptions of themselves. So, or even like their psychological perceptions of the world is like slowly changing their behaviors.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, even with that, like women in the house, we make really big deal out of things like as she was talking about, like the little, what we consider little things that are actually really a huge deal. Even as simple as like, you know, your eating habits getting better, your room, your space you have continually kept clean, like even though like that's never been something you've ever had to worry about. Or especially when a resident decides to like go to a trade school or sign up for classes or any of these things, it doesn't really matter if they, you know, we're not talking about the success of getting through them. We're talking about the fact that you applied and you believe like this is something that's valuable that you can do.
And it's also like flying in the face of the lies that the trafficker probably controlled her with, like,
right.
So now she's choosing to believe like, well, he always said I was stupid, so that's why I had to do the thing with him, but y'all are saying I'm not stupid and I can try, or I can go to school. Like I never saw myself as somebody that could go to school, like,
yeah.
And then when they pass math tests and when they're trying to get their high set, it does deserve like giant recognition, because those are all the tiny little, I mean, we reflecting back to Maslow's hierarchy, eventually it goes from like that base need of like just food, clothing, shelter to place of belonging, to love and affection, to identity, etc. And so if he's been exploiting all of those levels of hierarchy of that, who that human is, and then she starts to have a different vision of herself, or we have male survivors in our services too, he starts finding a different vision of himself, then that's success.
Absolutely.
And so I would probably say success stories are probably a myriad of kind of the examples we've already shared, but
yeah.
I mean, I think that it could be
even youth like coming into the office and suddenly being like more social with people.
Yeah.
Like that's something that has blown my mind and experiences like some of our youth clients coming in and like they just start a conversation with me and I didn't have to like draw it out of them to talk to me. It felt like something huge because it was even just like socially taking steps forward to communicate and talk and not not even want to be in the room, really. It's great. Even just the small things, or even residents being like, asking us to hang out with them while we're there, like wanting people to, you know, be around, or as Rachel said, like feeling like they trusted us more, just with like what they would come confide in us. There's those things, especially you saw them grow as people, like just in becoming more human, more themselves again, is what it seemed.
Yeah, I mean, we've had survivors that for sure, like after a year and a half, like it's a very clear success story because they've gotten their GED, they've gotten a job, they've gotten her kids back, they've been given a car by somebody incredible in the community, they've been hired at a couple of different places, they've gotten an apartment, etc. And so that's clearly like all of us can be like, yep, that can go in the success category. But I think even things like taking our survivors, I remember taking one of our survivors to a new ballet banquet one day, and she just, when we walked in the door and she saw this banquet hall set with just this incredible fundraiser banquet for a new ballet at University of Memphis, she paused in the doorway and said, I've never been to a place that's just so beautiful and that like welcomed at a table that was so beautiful and set for me. And she had just never seen that. And I mean, and that's just really convicting and humbling, because after years being a nonprofit, like I don't get thrilled at all to get invited to a banquet. Even if I'm like super all about that person's mission and cause and what they're doing in the world, I just don't feel like going to another banquet. And yet for some people, just being brought to a table that looks like it's been prepared for them. And I don't know how much of your listeners are faith motivated, but it makes me think of in Luke where that's literally what it says, like a king set a table for them. And he told a steward to go invite all the folks, and this is clearly my translation. All the folks said, I'm too busy. And he said, well, go back again and ask more folks. No, I'm too busy. And he said, go out to the highways and the byways and say a place has been set for you. And that's even kind of what we do with one of our programs. It's called Lives Worth Saving. And it's people who've been arrested for prostitution. They are being given the opportunity to come to this class and kind of learn that there are programs in the community that would help them kind of find a way out. And we intentionally ask volunteers to come alongside us to set the tables for them. Yeah. So we intentionally have flowers and colorful napkins. And if it's Christmas time, then there've been people that have made super elaborate, like itty bitty, like gingerbread houses. And
I love it. It's one of my Christmas trees that we do. I do.
Yeah, just because it's one of those things that I feel like it's one of the clearest places that it's like we get the opportunity to set a place for them, and they know that it's technically court diversion. So again, like it could feel like, meaning we could make it like a traffic citation court, but we very intentionally have it hopefully feel more like kind of that scripture or that presence of like you walk in and you see that a place has been prepared for you and you're being offered like hope and relationship and support system, as opposed to just getting something off your record to go back to court.
Man, okay, so what do you guys need most right now at RestoreCore that people can help contribute?
Yeah, I don't want to beat around the bush. Like funding is absolutely something that we need. One thing that is incredible about a couple of grants that we have is that we have some matching grants. And so if people do want to give, they can know that, especially right now, we have 3 different grants that have matching components. And so, those grants actually match 4 to 1.
Oh, wow.
And so somebody gives $20 and it is matched with $80 for $100 gain for that program. And so I think that if anybody wants to give $20, we would encourage you to do so. Or if anybody wants to give the $100 and have it turn into a $500 gain, so like match with $400, then we covet that as well. And so I think that that's a really big one, just because as you can probably assume, like just funding is tough during this time. Like we're not able to be in the community. We're not able to share the need or share the story as often. And so, so we're just trying to find creative ways to welcome more people to participate in this cause with us. Like this cause of, if you're a faith person, like a cause of ransoming the captive. And this is like an opportunity to participate in that kind of response to scripture. If the cause of like fighting, like being a part of this global change to counter like human trafficking in your community. So like we absolutely, the funding aspect is that participation in knowing that you get to know that you're a part of the solution, so to speak, and that you're coming alongside, you're becoming one of those champions to like a new life with the survivors. Very specific other donation needs I think we have right now is we need diapers, like 4 and 5, size 4s and 5s, and some diaper wipes. We have a handful of survivors who've just had new babies or are expecting new babies.
We prefer those things over like lots of clothes, because it's hard to get those exactly as they need. But diapers, absolutely.
Gift cards are always easy, whether it's gift cards for like Kroger or Walmart, which makes it where, again, like Julia said that she's a residential advocate. If a new person comes into the safe house today, and as she's being welcomed in the safe house, we call our safe houses Blossom House. If Julia's working that shift and she's helping her unpack and then realizes she doesn't have no clothes. Like, what do we do about this? And yes, we do have a donation closet, but as Julia mentioned, sometimes the sizes might not be right, but also there's something super valuing to being able to just like, let's let you go somewhere and pick out your own thing, which we might still, we'll then go to the donation closet too, to like bulk up your wardrobe. But how do we give them the opportunity to like the tiniest little place where they already get to have control and make their own decision about something? Because that's one of the challenges. They come into the safe house and we're offering like a new road, but there are going to be aspects of like guidelines and, you know, curfews and all this other stuff. And so where are the places where we can give the survivor an opportunity for autonomy and control? And so gift cards to like Target, Kroger, Walmart, Sam's Club, etc. Yeah, Marshalls, TJ Maxx are really like great. Or even small like $10 or $15, $20 gift cards for food places, whether it's a local food local restaurant like Huey's, Patrick's. Like
we love to go get some food sometimes. Yeah. That's like how we treat ourselves. Like that's probably how we celebrate more often than not at the house.
You take someone out.
It's just everyone wants to have certain foods that they love when it's like.
So if a girl did come home and she's passed her math test, then like let's everybody get in the car and
where you want to go for dinner, or like, we have this gift card, let's use that thing to
celebrate for birthdays and everything else. And so it's just really food is, and then especially obviously like the smaller gift cards for kind of maybe one of the fast food chains makes it easy. Like if a volunteer is going to be the courier for the day, so to speak, the Lyft driver for the day, and help us get a survivor to court and then get the survivor over to a therapy appointment and then get the survivor somewhere else, then we can give that volunteer a $10 gift card to Chick-fil-A, and then the volunteer can also have that opportunity to like pause with them in the middle of the day, share a meal. Because I think we would all argue as well that like when you share a meal with someone, you're sharing a relationship.
Yeah.
And so absolutely. Yeah.
Man. Okay. How do people get involved? Is your website the best way?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, Rachel, it is. She's like, don't let them call me. Because she tends to just like give out her personal information and everyone kind of calls her. And so she's like, yes, website.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do have a volunteer coordinator. I will say in terms of like, actual volunteer opportunities right now, we don't have very many. But hashtag COVID.
Yeah. We usually love volunteers. We love them right now. It's just limited.
Yeah, there are limited opportunities, maybe some admin opportunities here and there, but actually our community engagement team, they're kind of revamping, they're utilizing this time of not being able to have all of our volunteers around to kind of change our on-ramp process and training process and some different opportunities. And so I would probably say go to the website and also just follow all of our social media channels like Facebook, Instagram, etc., because hopefully not only will opportunities be listed there, like even if we get an emergent ask from one of our care coordinators, like, hey, we really need like size 14 shoes, then that's going to show up in our social media. But then there's also you'll learn more about like what that new volunteer process is going to look like as it gets closer to April. We're planning on kind of relaunching a little bit of our systems.
Gotcha. A lot of little pieces of information and helpful things like that are also put on their social media.
Yeah, just red flags.
Just things that are really helpful. So a lot of their social media accounts are really good to follow just for all of those things.
And what are like the usernames or handles on those? Is it just Restore Core?
Restore you can find on Facebook. Yes, for Restore, and you'll see the logo pop up of the orange and
like the crescent moon and kind of the person that's coming out of that crescent moon. I don't know if anybody realizes that's what it is, but it's supposed to be a person kind of coming out of
coming out of the darkness.
Yeah.
And then Instagram it's also just Restore. I think it's just Restore
underline.
Yes.
Like a underscore. Is that what it's called?
Yes. Underscore.
CORPS.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
See, you knew it.
Well, I will tag you so hopefully people will see it. Okay. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about or discuss? Anything I didn't ask or something you're just chomping at the bit?
I think for this one we've done plenty.
She could keep going.
An hour for sure. An hour and 3 minutes. If we take off those other 7.
Little intermission there.
I will say that like Restore Core, what people are signing up for, I don't know if we like directly covered what Restore does in terms of services, because we've talked a lot about all the things that we do. Rachel is the executive director of Restore Core. With her is Cozy Hale, and
Who's our director of survivor services. Yeah.
Right. So within the whole team has different sections where there's youth, and then there's a non-English speaking coordinator, and then we have the residential program, and then we have the community partners. We have all these different departments of RestoreCorps that maximize everything that they do, and make sure that everyone is specifically covered to their needs, not just like one person is over everything that's going on.
So kind of what she's saying is like I kind of ran through on the front end like what our mission statement is, but I said that we take this 3-pronged approach. So empower survivors, equip communities, change systems. And so under survivor empowerment, we tend to, as survivors are referred to our services, they end up in kind of one of 2 main categories, either a community survivor or a Blossom House survivor. And under community survivor, so that's a survivor that for whatever reason, like living in the community is what she or he prefers or is just best. And so it might be a single mom and her daughter, or it might be a male Spanish-speaking 17-year-old, and that male Spanish-speaking 17-year-old is not a good fit for our Blossom House for lots of different reasons. And so we have the survivors kind of funneled in those 2 major categories. And then within the community-based survivors, there's the up to 24-year-olds. So that's all of our youth survivors. And we have youth and emerging adults together kind of in a group. And then the youth is up to 18, emerging adults is 18 to 24. Then we have Spanish speaking as like the first language is a whole different category. And then the 25 and over. And so those are like 3 subgroups of our community-based survivors. And so as she mentioned, we have care coordinators that are specialized to those different subgroups to make sure that as those survivors' care plans are put together, they're being put together by a case manager that really understands kind of the idiosyncrasies of that kind of subgroup of survivor. We're actually just here in the month of January, we're also launching another program with Department of Corrections. So Tennessee Department of Corrections has asked us to also come alongside our some other partners across the state. So that's Thistle Farms and In Slavery Tennessee in Middle, and then Grow Free in East Tennessee, to create like some continuity among our programs, like our organizations, to launch programs in Tennessee Department of Corrections to better identify human trafficking victims who might be what's called like, again, that victim offender intersect. So oftentimes like somebody might have been arrested and now they're incarcerated for a related offense to the trafficking. And so how do we still implement survivor services even while somebody's being incarcerated? And so that's like incarceration and reentry.
Mm-hmm. Almost made it the whole time. Yeah.
She's real passionate.
Good for her. Yeah.
Yeah. So in addition to Empower Survivors, though, we do a lot of things like this, like that whole community training, community equipping piece is really important to us, because unless more people in the community, whether it's the like highly professional training of, like I mentioned, like we do airport security training, but we also do teacher training, but we also do then lay people training, like speak at Rotaries or speak at churches. And so that's not going to be so specific to that person's profession, but we can do all of those. And we like to do kind of all of those multi-level tiered kind of trainings, because if people continue to just not know what human trafficking looks like, to not understand the definition, or to not know those red flags like what you were asking, then human trafficking can continue to hide in plain sight in our community. And so we think that it's really important that we train. And then the third piece is that legislative piece, or that like system change piece that we've already kind of spoken around and spoken about, but we didn't like identify, like we want to eradicate human trafficking by changing systems. And so systems are like the prostitution diversion class, which is Lives We're Saving, or the Department of Corrections process that we're working with. Or 2 years ago, one of the laws that was passed requires all Tennessee teachers to provide or to be trained in human trafficking. And so then we worked alongside our partners to create a video for Department of Education that's hosted on In Slavery Tennessee's website as a way that Tennessee teachers can meet that requirement for their licensure. And so constantly identifying systems where maybe victims are continuing unidentified, as well as look at the macro system of Tennessee law and affect change within our actual legislation. We just feel like that's really important to be able to, like, we modeled it after a Dietrich Bonhoeffer quote that says it is not enough to bandage the wounds of victims trampled under the wheels of injustice, but to drive a spoke into the wheel itself. And so that's what we feel really passionate to be able to make a model that does bandage wounds when and where needed, but to find creative ways to drive a spoke into the wheels of injustice that kind of allow more and more victims to be exploited in our community.
Great. Any final thoughts, Julia? Anything at all?
I'm good. That was it.
All right. Do you guys have any good book recommendations?
Oh my.
Just in life. Doesn't have to be human trafficking, but any good book recommendations, documentaries, anything like that?
Oh, so many.
For human trafficking or life?
Just in general.
Let's just stick with human trafficking at this moment, because there's a long list that I can think of.
I will say for life, I'm gonna I listen to her recommendation and I acknowledge it. But something that's really convicting me lately is this book called, I think it's called The Common Rule. And I just think that it's pretty, it's so simple, but it kind of even talks about how we make for ourselves a liturgy of hurriedness, a liturgy of busyness, as opposed to like intentional habits for peace, intentional habits for rest. And so that's really what's challenging me these days.
The Common Rule.
I think that's what it is. I'm pulling up right now since now I'm trying to tell you all about it, but I want to make sure I get the title right.
The book that so when we began working here, the reason I said that when you mentioned that is because when we began working here, I asked her the same question, and she sent me a very long list of all of these things. I've worked like halfway through it, maybe. But The Body Keeps Score is one that...
The Body Keeps Score.
Yeah. Body Keeps the Score, yeah.
Yeah, The Body Keeps the Score. It just talks about trauma and just like the human body's response to trauma. There's mention of trafficking in it and everything like that, but I think it's just great to understand.
Yeah, especially if you're just a human in the world right now. Like,
right.
There's so many of our neighbors, people in our churches, et cetera. There's just people living through a lot of isolated and acute as well as compounded trauma. And so it just helps you kind of understand that impact on individuals and communities. So human trafficking specific, I'd probably say Girls Like Us by Rachel Lloyd is a really big one.
Renting Lacey
is another one. I also really I think it's really important to kind of not just read about human trafficking, but kind of read Bloodlines by John Piper or
The New Jim
Crow, by Michelle Alexander, or Barking to the Choir by Gregory Boyle, or even his other, he has another book, Tattoos on the Heart. He works with gang intervention and originally in LA, but it's all over the world now. And so it just, I feel like those are some of the big ones that have been really impactful to me. I will say, I started out, the first one I think I ever read was The Good News About Injustice by Gary Haaga, who's the founder of International Justice Mission. And I was reading it it's set telling his story of facing human trafficking in Cambodia, and I was reading it while I was in Cambodia, so that was obviously it just really challenged me from the get-go, and that was probably the first kind of human trafficking specific one that I read.
That's good. That's a lot of book recommendations.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got to do some shopping now.
I was like, there's a lot more.
Yeah.
I could keep going. Thank you so much for having us, Isaac.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I'm glad we could finally make it happen.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this has been good.
Yeah, I was telling my roommate before I came here, it's like, well, originally we were supposed to do it sometime in the fall and then couldn't, and then I think we were pushing for January because that's Human Trafficking Awareness Month or something like that.
National Human Trafficking Awareness Month, yeah.
And then it snowed.
And that didn't work, and then last week, then the snow.
Yeah.
It's like, man, I just don't want this to happen.
When can this happen?
Yeah, so I'm glad we can make it. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been great.
Thank you for all the great work you guys are doing.
Thank you. I think that probably all of us would say, or at least I would say, that I feel like it chose me more than I chose it, and I'm just grateful that I get to do it.
Yeah, especially, you didn't take a salary for 7 years, you're saying?
Yeah, I bartended a lot and worked at Rape Crisis, actually. I definitely received phone calls from law enforcement, U.S. Attorney's Office, etc., while I was serving and bartending. And I'll never forget a TBI agent yelling at me like, where are you right now? Can you get yourself paid already so I can stop calling you while you're bartending at a restaurant? Because when I call you, I need you to actually be able to show up for me. And I was like, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, help me out. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, but I will say shout out to Huey's, because Huey's management and owners, et cetera, to give me the last 10 years of being on staff with them and having to run away at a moment's notice to like answer a phone call has been exceptionally gracious. I can't tell you how many other servers and as well as managers have worked my section before because I've had to answer a phone call about a victim.
It takes a village.
It does. It takes a village is right. Sometimes the village can look totally different than anyone expects it to.
That was Rachel Haaga and Julia Bay. Thank you for listening. We will see you on the other side.